very warm welcome to episode 48 of my Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be in the living room and I'm going to make a start on the decorating. So I've chosen a wallpaper and I want to get that on one of the walls and on the chimney breast. And I've also got a couple of more internal doors to make. So let's get started. So I'm starting off today by making two more internal doors. So I've just got the living room and the bedroom doors to make, and then I'll have one to make for the wall that I put in, the false wall going from the bathroom into the back hallway. So I just sort of wanted to stress that always measure the door opening separately, because I've just found out that the bedroom door, which is on the sort of third floor of the house, was about 3mm taller than the living room door. So I'm so glad I didn't just make them according to my plan in my book. So always do sort of treat them all separately. Don't assume they're going to be the same height, and measure and cut accordingly. Otherwise you spend all that time making a door that you're not going to be able to use. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of this again, because I've done this a couple of times now, and you'll find those videos here on YouTube and in the sort of relevant room sections. So I'll get on and make these, and then the room will be ready to start adding the wallpaper, and then I can measure for the skirting and coving. So I've constructed my door frames and they're now drying. Once they're dry, I'll go and fit those, and then I can start making the doors. Always make sure your frames fit as well before you start building the doors, as again you might be wasting your time. So I just wanted to show you the wallpaper that I'm going to be using in that room. So I said before I want a sort of log cabin-y type feel, so lots of red checked fabric, reds, creams and green, and this paper has all of those colours and some really nice flowers as well. And I like that sort of quite busy look as well, so we'll have some really comfy, or a comfy sofa and chair in there, maybe in a red fabric, I'm not sure yet, might do it in a cream, but we'll have lots of lovely red and green cushions and lots of check in there, and some nice knitted or crocheted blankets and knitted cushions and things like that. I want to make it really warm and cosy, and we'll have some dark wood furniture in there as well. And I think I've said before also about having a log burner in there. So I've got a really sort of good image in my mind of what I want to do in this room. So what I actually want to do now is fit the wallpaper, and I'm going to do the sort of side wall, which will be the left-hand wall where the door is, and then I'm going to do the chimney breast as well, just to sort of follow along with what I've done in the other rooms. So I'm going to begin by applying the wallpaper to the chimney breast. The rest of the room has got lining paper, which I've then painted over. So I want to put lining paper around the chimney breast first, and that way when I put my wallpaper on, which is just printed on normal printer paper, the colour of the wood isn't going to affect the colour of the wallpaper. So that's worth thinking about. If you've already sort of painted your other walls, then you might just want to add a coat of paint to your chimney breast if it's just bare wood. But prepare the surface of your chimney breast so that it's going to be the same as the other walls that you're putting paper over. And I'd probably say, even if you're not using your pattern paper elsewhere, to perhaps add some primer or lining paper or something to your the bare wood, because then it will give a nicer background and also a nicer base for actually sticking the paper to. So I'm near the end of some Gorilla wood glue here. So I'm just going to use this up. Now I have been using, I'm also doing a 1940s doll's house for my Patreon channel, and I've actually been using wallpaper paste. But the last time I did that I had sort of a bit of a bad experience with it, because it was a little bit too runny and the paper really creased. So I actually get on better using the wood glue. And it works well with paper projects as well, so it does stick well. But if you prefer using wallpaper paste, whether that's a real one that you would use in your own home, or whether it's a sort of specialised doll's house paste, you know, I'm pretty sure they're the same, but you can buy them already pre-mixed, then that's up to you. So it's not a sort of rule, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing, but I prefer using the wood glue. I always sort of have better experiences with it than with the paste. I think I like it because it's thicker than the paste. So I'm actually just going to apply the glue to the front of the chimney breast. I'll apply the glue to the front, get the paper on, and then I'll put the glue around the sides. It's just easier, I think, than gluing or applying glue to the whole thing. And the other thing I'm trying to do as well is just smooth out the ridges in the glue. And I'm using the wrong brush really, just because it's gone quite hard, so it's putting ridges in. But what I'll do is I'll just get a soft brush and just soften all these ridges out before I put my paper on. This one's much softer. And I'll probably use this for my gluing from now on. And then I've already wrapped the paper around and put the folds in. So that helps as well to do that first, especially if your paper has been rolled, because it will just try to go back into a roll. Crease along your edges, and I'm just flattening it out with my hand. And this lining paper is nice and thick, so it tends not to wrinkle, as long as you don't put too much glue or paste on. So the thinner the paper, the more sort of likely you are to get wrinkles, so just be really careful. And I know I get a lot of questions whenever I mention lining paper, because I don't think it's sort of like a standard thing in some countries as it is here in the UK. We would just go into any sort of DIY store and buy lining paper. It's just a standard thing. But if you are having trouble getting hold of it, this is really just like sketch pad paper. So I think it's probably 200 or even 300 GSM, maybe 200. I think 300 is more like a sort of card. But it's just a nice thick paper that has that sort of matte finish, and it's sort of like a blotting paper feel to it, if you know what blotting paper is, if you've used that before. You know, like the paper you get in scrapbooks. I'm talking about the old-fashioned type scrapbooks here with the different coloured pages. It's that sort of texture. So it really is just anything thick to line your walls, rather than using a liquid primer or, you know, like a paint style primer. And you're just giving yourself a nice surface. So where on the chimney breast, for example, I had a join down the centre, this is covering that up. So I've got a nice smooth surface there now, and the join isn't going to then show through my thinner paper. So that's all you're doing, you're just creating a nice flat surface to work on. Okay, so I'm just going to clean my cutting mat off so that I can then turn this over and apply the glue along the sides of the chimney breast. So that's the first side stuck down there. I've purposely left a little bit of an overlap. It's better to cut the piece bigger than you're going to need it, and then trim off at the end once the glue has completely dried. If you try and get an exact fit, when you put the glue on, it might sort of shrink the paper back a little bit. So always just have, or leave yourself a little bit to play with there. And I've got a piece of card down here as well. So I'm now going to do this side. And I'm actually just popping the glue onto the paper this time, just because it's easier to get to, I suppose. I'm not sure sort of what the rule is, whether it's best to put it onto the paper or onto the actual wall. I'm sure you have your preferences. Drop a comment below, let me know what you do. Just putting that on there like that. Just be careful not to put your paper then down in the glue that's overspilled. And just smooth that on. And you'll see that I've sort of blocked up the opening there And again, I'll trim that out once the glue has completely dried, and that just gives, I find, a neater finish. And it's easier to do as well because you're just sort of covering one whole big piece rather than having lots of little sections and strips and things to put on. And I'll do the same thing again when I actually apply the patterned wallpaper. Okay, so really pleased with that. I'm going to leave this to dry off completely now, then I can trim my overhangs and then I can actually get the patterned wallpaper into place. So my long wall in the doll's house, which has the door in it, needs 2 pieces of paper. So I've just sort of found the repeat, line one piece of paper up under the other, and then you can make the cut using your craft knife. And you obviously don't want to overlap them, as you'll be able to see that ridge. So you really do just want to butt them as close up together as you can, as you would with, you know, real sized wallpaper. And if you have to have a join, try to get it somewhere where it's not going to be seen. So you might want to do it at the top of your door frame, and that way, because you're sort of cutting out a bit for the door, you're only going to have a join sort of up there from the top of the door to the ceiling. Or try to get it to towards the back of your room. And the other thing I think as well is when you've got sort of a really busy wallpaper like this, if it's not a perfect join, you're not going to see it as clearly as you would with sort of a simpler pattern. Now this piece will need trimming because I think it was probably only about 3 inches that I need towards the back there. So I'm going to go and measure this up now and then get this into place. So I did the wallpaper in the living room off camera just because it's really difficult to have the camera set up and sort of get into the room as well. But I'm really pleased with how it's gone on, especially the little sort of add-in bit at the back there. And I'm not even sure if you can pick that up on camera. Sometimes it can be really tricky to add pieces in like that. So I glued the front piece into place first, so the larger piece, and then attached that extra bit along the join line, and it just really nicely butted up against the first piece. So really pleased with that. And like I said earlier, with a busier pattern, you're not going to notice the line as much. Now, sorry it's a bit dark in there, but I've run out of batteries in that light I normally use and the little ring light. So I'm waiting for some batteries to come, but I hope you can sort of see in there clearly enough. Now you'll notice I've papered over the door. That was intentional. And what I'll do again when the paper has dried, I'll put a book on the correct side of the door just to hold it flat, or a small cutting mat rather, and then I'll cut around the door opening, and I always find that makes it a bit neater as well. And because obviously the paper isn't tall enough to go from ceiling to floor, I just brought in a little bit of my skirt in there to make sure that the paper was down low enough, and also my coving to make sure that it was up high enough as well so that you can't see any of that white border. And I left the white border on the top and bottom and just sort of cut it away at the sides. So I'm now going to paper the chimney breast. So I've trimmed the paper along the edges at the back there. I'm now going to trim out the sort of fire opening. Like that. And I think it's best to do it if you're using a lining paper, get rid of the lining paper, then put your pattern paper on and then trim out your pattern paper, just because it's easier to cut away a thinner piece. And there as well. Like that. So I now want to attach my patterned paper, just making sure I've got it the right way up there. And again, I'll start at the front and then I'll overlap it at the back, and then I can trim off afterwards. I'm sort of making sure that's centralised on there. I'm just thinking, because I'm going to be having a 3mm thick hearth at the bottom. Where's my, let me check here with my skirting and coving again. So that will be ground level then when that 3mm starts. So that will be the skirting, so that can actually go up quite a bit higher. So I can go to the top of the chimney breast there with the paper. I'm just wondering whether I should actually go and measure it in the room just to make sure. I think I will. I'll be back in a mo. Oh. Yeah, that fits perfectly if I do it that way, so that's good. So I'll put the paper on so that the white line is just overhanging the top of the chimney breast there. So if I sort of do half of that white line above, I've then got room for the skirting board and hearth down there, and that will be covered by the skirting. So always go and check if you're not sure. It's always best to check these things before you know, actually fitting it and then discovering that you've done it wrong. Talking from experience here. Right, I've got a bit of glue left in there. So again, I'm just going to put it on the front first. So I've got a few wrinkles in here. So I'm just using my hairdryer, which will speed up the glue drying time, and then the paper will shrink back and pull out the wrinkles. So the hairdryer worked really well on those wrinkly areas, so I'm now going to continue around the sides. Okay, so that's the chimney breast done as well. I'm going to leave this to dry now, and I'll probably leave that drying overnight and then come back in the morning and trim off the flaps and trim out the front. So I'll be back with you and on. Okay, so the paper in the living room has now completely dried into place. So I've got a cutting mat here. Hope you can see what I'm doing there. I'm filming through the door of the study, and I'm just going to use my left hand if I can, just to cut around the inside of the door. So hold the cutting mat really tightly against the opening, and then just go down the sort of line of the door there. Across the top there. It's actually really good for cognitive function to use, you know, your hand that you don't usually use. So I'm right-handed, so doing things with your left hand does actually improve your brain. I just recently read that and thought that was really interesting. Okay, so I think that's completely cut through now. If you've got any bits that are still attached, don't pull, but just cut through again. And it's difficult because I can't get my head in there to see where it's not actually cut. So it's a question of sort of just feeling, I suppose. Let's see if we've got that. Yeah, it's just down this. I think I've cut some of the paint away there as well at the top of the door. It's just down this side. Let's go in that way. Now that's actually the lining paper around the door that I'm cutting into there. It's alright as long as it's on that edge. There. And what have I done there? Like that. And then I'll just bring you around into the room and show you that we've got a nice neat edge there. And don't forget we're going to be sticking our door surrounds on there as well. But it's just nice to get it as neat as you possibly can. And I'm really looking forward to getting that door into place. I've still got to make those yet, so hopefully I'll get that done today. Right, let's go back into the craft room. So what I also want to do now is trim up the chimney breast. So I'm going to cut away these sort of side flaps. I've probably got the camera at the wrong angle there. So sorry if you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just trimming along the side there. And that's the side that isn't seen from the front of the doll's house. So I'm going right up to the edge of the wood there. I'll just get rid of that main flap. Oops. Like that. And just tidy that up a bit. But on the other side, which is the side which is visible from the front, I actually just want to leave a bit that I can then fold around. So what's on there now is a little bit too much. So I'm just going to sort of trim that off so that I've still got that fold around bit. So you don't want to cut too close to, you know, the actual edge of the chimney breast, as that might be seen then from the front. So in fact, I'm even just going to trim that off with my scissors. So I'm just going to cut along there like that. And then I can just sort of fold that in, tuck that over and make a nice neat edge. You don't want to leave too much there or have it too bulky, because your chimney breast then isn't going to sit flat to the wall. So I've also just got a little bit of paper to trim away around the top there. I'm not in the right place at all with the camera, am I? But I'm sure you know what I'm doing. And then I want to just trim out the actual opening. Like that. So what I would normally do, and I'm sure what you've seen me do before in some of the other rooms, is to create the hearth and then glue that into place before I put the chimney breast into place. But what I'm actually going to do, I'm doing it slightly different this time. So I've cut a piece from 3mm sheet wood here that will fit along the bottom of the chimney breast, so just the same width and depth as the overall piece. I'm going to glue that into place, and then I can glue the chimney breast into place, and then I shall create a hearth that will be the same thickness as that, so 3mm again, 1/8 of an inch, and then actually glue that into place once this is all dried. And I'm just doing it like that because I want to try and get hold of some real stone, sort of little flagstones, and I'd quite like to do something like that in there. I'm going to be having a little log burner in there, so I'd like it stood on some flagstones. And if I can't find some real stone, I'll perhaps use some card or even some wood to sort of recreate a stone effect. So I just really want to be able to get the chimney breast in and get all of the skirting and coving cut, and then have a think about the hearth. And I also haven't really thought about the surround yet, and in some of my research pictures, which I found a lovely sort of Laura Ashley living room, which is similar to the sort of colour scheme that I want, they've actually just got like a railway sleeper across as a, you know, a mantelpiece, and I quite like the look of that, and I quite like that sort of rustic look along with this sort of lovely flowery sort of feminine look. I like sort of the idea of mixing the two, but again I haven't totally made up my mind yet. So what I'll do is I'll get this stuck into place, and then we'll get some brick in there, because either way we would have the brick wall showing in there, which will look nice behind the log burner. And then I can sort of have a think about that, and I might come back to that in the next episode, and then I can come back to you and let you know what I've decided upon. Okay, so let's get this glued into place. I've got a little bit of glue there, but I think I need a bit more. Right, so I'm just applying the glue to these outside parts. And then I'm going to sit that on there, making sure that it's square, the front and sides. Okay, so I'm going to give that a press. I don't want to use masking tape on this, obviously, because I don't want to rip the paper. If you hadn't papered the piece and you were doing this, then obviously you could use your masking tape. But I have got a couple of my larger clamps here to hand, which I'm going to put on each of those. So give it a good press. Like that. And then I think I can only get one into each of those openings, and that'll be enough. Just sort of hold that into place. So I'm going to leave it to dry now, and then, as I said earlier, we'll attach the brick paper inside the opening. So to line the chimney breast opening, I've got some random brick paper here, and this is embossed as well. It's got all those lovely different shades of brick in there too. And I've used this in the other rooms of the house where I've got a chimney breast. And what I've done is cut it to the height of the opening, and then I've folded it around the insides, and then I've just put a little flap to come around the front there, and then when I do my surround, whatever I decide upon, that will cover those flaps, and it will come down lower than the opening. So don't worry that we've got a bit of a hole there, because that won't be seen when the actual the surround is in place. And what you can do as well, if you're worried, is you can put a bit of black paint up there on the opening and even onto the wall at the back of the chimney breast. But I'm going to have it so that my surround comes down probably, I don't know, almost an inch, I would say, from the top of the opening there. So none of that will be seen unless you actually manage to get your head into the room and actually look up there. And then that little hole that you can see there, I went to put this into place, and I measured from the sort of edge of the doll's house the same distance that there is at the edge in the study. So both of these chimney breasts are placed at the same distance into the room. So that's something you might want to have a think about as well, because obviously chimney breasts would be quite uniform, or would be uniform in a house, because they obviously run on from each other. And then I just ran my finger over the brick at the back there to make a little indentation of the two little electrical eyelets, because I'm going to be using those obviously to then light the log burner. And then I've just used my knife to cut that out, and it's obviously a lot easier to do it before the paper is actually in place. So now I'm just going to glue this into place. So I'm just going to pop the glue onto the sort of side bits and the flaps, and I've got my spreader here to do that. I've just sort of folded that again so that will slip nicely back in there. Make sure you're pushing it right down to the back of those sides, because obviously that will be touching the wall, and I'm also just making sure that it's right down to the bottom in there too. Like that, and then you can glue it down. Like that. So that will stick obviously against the wall, and then where I've got that line along the back there, I'll be having my tiles inside there, which will cover that. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry off now. Okay, so the doors are complete, and I've just attached the handles, and I've just used some clamps to hold those into place. The particular ones that I use, these sort of brass lever handles, let me see if I can actually find one to show you. A little drawer here. So it's these ones that I'm using, that I've used sort of throughout the doll's house, and they're not always flat along the back, so sometimes when you put them flat onto the door you do need to use your clamps just to hold them into place. But the Gorilla Wood Glue works with those, I always find. And they've been drying now for about 15 minutes, so they're probably ready now to be glued into place in the doll's house. Okay, so I've tried the door into place and it's a really nice tight fit. I've also tried opening the door, and again it's a little bit tight, but I'm going to wait till it's in place and then see how it opens and closes, and then just take off a little bit more if I need to. And when they're actually in place and pushed a little bit tighter, the action is always going to be different to when you're just sort of trying it, you know, while it's not in place, while it's loose. So it's a good idea to, obviously if it's, you know, really tight and you can't get it back in the frame, then make some adjustments beforehand. But otherwise wait until it's in there. And when I sort of tried the frame into place, it was actually so tight that I was thinking, I wonder if I actually do need to put glue on, because then you're actually going to be gluing the frames, you know, the door frames and everything around the door as well, which really holds it into place and hides the edges. So I suppose it's up to you. If you've got a really tight fit, you might not need to use glue. But I just thought I would. I just thought you know, I don't want it moving about in the frame, you know, in the future or anything. And then once you've sort of got it in there and put your surrounds around the outside, there's not a lot you can do. So if you're happy you've got a really tight fit, it's not going to move at all, then you might not need to glue it into place. Right, let's just pop that out of the way. It's difficult to hold on to these once you've glued them. Make sure I'm the right way up. So I'm doing it right this time so that the flat edge of the door, we spoke about this in an earlier video, is in the landing area. And the only one I've done wrong so far is the double doors into the dining room. And at the time I didn't realise, I was just so sort of keen on getting the glue in and getting them into place that I didn't really double check. But it doesn't really matter, but it's just nice to keep things uniform, I think. Yeah, so that's gone in there really nicely. And then if I just show you, the actual sort of tightness was when I try to open it, because the door will open into the living room. I probably shouldn't actually do it while it's still sort of drying into place. I want to open it and get sort of get my fingers in to push the frame against the side, so I will open it. So it's tight coming in here. As you can see, as I'm opening that, it's pushing the frame out of place. It scares me when you hear big clicks like that. But there, it does open into the room like that. You know, if I push it, it probably will push right back, but I don't want to risk sort of cracking the top of the door where the pin hinge is. So you don't have to have them wide open. You normally wouldn't display with them wide open either. Yeah, so I'm just pulling that frame into place, and because there's a bit of movement there, I'm glad now that I did use glue. Over to that one as well. Push it against the floor as well, and I've got a bit of gapping on the landing side that I can just feed a little bit of stripwood flooring into. Cover that up. Just little sort of finishing touches. If I get it sort of straight with the frame on both sides, I know I'm in the right place then. Just use your fingers to push it all into place. And sort of give it a press, but I'm happy that that's in there nice and firmly. And it looks really good when you sort of look across and you've got the doors all in. It looks really nice. Okay, so I'll leave that one to dry, and now I'll go up and do the bedroom. So that's the bedroom door in as well. Now that wasn't quite as easy as the living room door, and although the frame was tight, it did go in, but then I had to do quite a bit of sanding along the edge of the door, and I also did it along this inside edge of the frame just to get the door to close nicely. And as I was doing that, I sort of knocked the handle out of place, so I've re-glued that, and that's why I've got the clamps back on there. But that does now close nicely. And that's the bedroom door closed as well. I also think it makes a room look more cosy when you've got the door on. Can't wait to sort of get back into the bedroom. I'm going to make that little dressing table that's here on the channel with the mirror and the little stool as well. So I'll get all that done off camera, as I've already done the tutorial for that. And then we'll have a tutorial for that lovely sort of large wardrobe along there. There's still lots to do in the little craft room. I want to have another day of just making miniatures to go in there, and I've also got to make the little chair, and that chair tutorial is also here on the channel, so I'll make that off camera as well. And that's the little sort of mock fold up chair that you'll find in the Craft Shed series. For the Craft Shed I did it in a lovely sort of pale green, but I'll make a white, I'll make one and paint it white obviously to go in the craft room, and then we'll get a little crocheted throw on there as well. So I've got all of that to do off camera. And then coming back down on the top landing there, I've got all of the landings and the entrance hall to finish off. Obviously getting the stairs actually fixed into place, they're just sort of lodged in place at the moment. So I want to get that runner going up the side, but I haven't decided how I'm going to do that yet, because I want something that's then going to run in with the skirting board once you get up to the top of the landing. I've got an arched window to build. Lots of bits and pieces to make for the guest bedroom, but that's looking pretty good in there. That's probably one of the most sort of complete rooms, apart from the kitchen. Living room. I'll be carrying on with that in the next episode. But again, that's looking so much better now, the door's on there. I like looking across the house like that so you can sort of see into all of the rooms. And then the dining room, which again I've got a sort of basic idea of what I want to do in there. A nice sort of really light airy room, lots of creams and beiges, and then blue and white china. Probably quite similar to our sort of dining room here, my real size dining room. And then the kitchen, and I was just sort of having a little look around the kitchen and thinking how much I like it. I moved that little plant off there when I was vacuuming, got a little bit of sanding dust on there. So I've got to dress this little unit, get more food supplies in the cupboard there, and that cupboard actually goes up on that back wall. It's a bit dark in there at the moment, and I've noticed as well that a lot of things are getting quite dusty, and that's obviously where I'm sort of working on the rest of the house and having the door open and things like that. I really do love that kitchen. I've still got to mend that chandelier up there, get that, if you see when I push that up, the chandelier goes up, so I need to either raise it a bit, wasn't on camera then, I need to raise it a bit or put like a little bit of wood in there so that that, you know, sits towards that beam there. And I think a little bit of wood would be okay, a little sort of strengthener up there. And then we've got lots more bits to make. I wanted to do some more polymer claying, get a little veg basket in there, nice loaf of bread. But kitchen's, you know, getting there as well. I'll do a little shopping bag that I want to have sort of standing down there and little things like that. And again, I'll do that off camera because it's all things that's already here on the channel. So do have a good look around the channel if you're new here as well. Have a look at my playlists. I've got them sort of divided out into furniture and miniatures. And then you'll find all the Doll's House Diary as a whole series, and then whatever I do in each room I put in a separate playlist as well. So just sort of have a little look and navigate your way around. And I'm not going to pan over to the other attic because I've just sort of stuck a load of stuff in there to get it out of the house while I vacuum, so it looks a bit messy. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for today, but I'm going to have a think about what I want to do with the fire surround in the living room, and then I can get started on cutting the skirting and coving and get all of that into place. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, bye.